What's going on, folks? We are officially in the early access period of V Rising. During this previous beta, we were allowed to record videos for this release, so I went ahead and recorded various topics including all the weapons, all the skills, and all the abilities. This is going to be an ultimate beginner's guide to the skills and weapons, but I have to say beginners because I wasn't able to fully test out each and every ability and builds on a regular basis, but I was able to get at least a basic understanding of everything on top of the builds I already played. Before we get started, I also wanted to point out that this video is being recorded with the early access version, so if you're watching this 6 months or a year from now, it's very possible that some of this might be outdated and there's probably going to be more weapons, but it should give you the overall gist. Currently, there's a total of 7 weapons that all have their own unique basic attacks and secondary skills. We have the sword, the axes, the mace, the spear, the reaper, the slashers, and the crossbow. Each weapon unlocks their secondary skill based on what tier of the weapon you have. When you first start the game and are using bone and reinforced bone weapons, you'll just have the basic attack and that's it. After you reach the copper tier, you unlock the first secondary skill, and after reaching iron and above, that's when you get the second. It's also important to notate that if you want to use Reaper or the slashers, those weapons only get unlocked when you reach the iron tier, meaning that you won't be able to craft them until you get the smithy workbench from Quincy the Bandit King. Following this, we have 5 ability trees, each with their own individual travel skills, regular abilities, and ultimates. We've got Blood, Unholy, Illusion, Chaos, and Frost. Now, many of these abilities and ultimates, aside from like 2 of them, are found by defeating V-Blood bosses out in the world and extracting their essence. I'm going to tell you where to find every one of them, but when hunting these, for some of them you'll want to have a blood altar crafted and begin to track them down, because a few of them are known to be roaming bosses, but I'll be sure to point those out. Let's keep it simple and start with the weapons. The first one is Sword. For using basic attacks in this game, you'll be using left click. Each weapon has a 3-hit combo for their basic attack and 2 secondary skills on Q for Quebec and E for Edward. The sword basic combo consists of 3 different slashes, 1, 2, and 3. Weapons also, believe it or not, have different bonuses against resources depending on what they are, and the sword has a bonus against vegetation, for example. For the first secondary skill, we have Whirlwind. Spin around and slice nearby enemies for 35 physical damage every 0.25 seconds for 1.1 second. Very useful in fighting big groups of mobs. Second skill is called Shockwave. Send forth a shockwave dealing 70% physical damage and knocking the enemy into the air for 1.6 seconds. You can recast the ability to teleport to the target, striking it 3 times, each strike dealing 25% physical damage. This skill especially is extremely useful in PvP for catching people trying to escape and keeping up with them. You can also use this skill in boss fights to temporarily disorient them because it seems to act as an iframe. We next have the axes. 3 quick slashes for the basic attack, 45% damage on the first one, second one, and then 55% on the final hit. The first secondary is called Frenzy. Dash forward and strike the first enemy dealing 100% physical damage, enter a state of frenzy that increases your movement speed by 25% and increases attack speed by 30% for 0.8 seconds, but only on a successful hit. Next, we have X Strike. Throw 2 axes in the shape of an X. Each hit deals 85% physical damage and slows the enemy for 1.5 seconds. Hitting the enemy where both axes intersect inflicts a 2-second incapacitate. This is a powerful skill in PvP, and this alone makes Axe one of the best PvP weapons in the game right now. Next weapon is going to be the Mace. Basic attack, 3 swipes with 50% damage on both of the first 2, and 60% physical damage on the third. It's got decent AoE, although I really wish we had an additional effect on this where you had a chance to stun your target as you continue to attack them. Right now the mace weapon is utilized more for tank-like characters and maybe support, but having something extra that helps them fill that role would be really nice. First secondary skill, Crushing Blow. Vault towards your mouse cursor and slam your mace into the ground, dealing 110% physical damage and inflicting a 2-second fading snare. One thing to know about the skill is that while using it, you are completely immune to knockback during the time spent in the air, making it more reliable to pull off as it cannot be easily interrupted. And then for the second one, we've got Smack. Slam enemies in front of you, dealing 50% physical damage, knocking them back and incapacitating them for 1.2 seconds. Next, we've got the Crossbow. Each hit that you take from this weapon deals 115% physical damage on hit. Now you may notice that this weapon is a little bit slow when it comes to firing. The thing is though, most people tend to think that it's not as viable of a weapon because of this, especially in PvP when people are moving around. everything's crazy and it's harder to get a shot in. But on the PvE side, I can say, having somebody in your group who focuses on crossbows can be extremely beneficial, especially on boss fights. There's a lot of mechanics in these boss fights that are much more deadly for the melee players, and people who use crossbows can a lot of times completely bypass this. For example, my group played through all 3 betas and we didn't really have anyone running crossbow on a regular basis until the last one. And it was amazing seeing how fast we burned through bosses, especially ones that had higher hitboxes than in the previous ones. Pretty sure they made some balancing changes to the bosses throughout the beta, so there's that too, but I still felt the difference of having a crossbow. First secondary skill is called Rain of Bolts. Fire a salvo of 5 bolts into the air that rain down on your enemies, dealing 40% physical damage each in an area and inflict a 1.5 second fading snare. Second skill is called Snapshot. Fire a quick bolt that deals 75% damage, interrupts casting, and inflicts a 2-second fading snare. With the right combination of V-Blood abilities, I do believe that the crossbow can be an extremely good asset to your clans. I've seen people enjoy running the Veil of Illusion travel skill or the Chaos one, followed by abilities like Spectral Assassin and Sanguine's Coil, Purgatory, or Frostbat. For the next weapon, we've got the Reaper. 3-hit basic attack just like the others, but almost immediately you'll notice that it has a crazy good range for its swipes, and it's this alongside its skills that make it incredibly good for dealing AoE damage in player versus environment. I'd also like to point out that the bonus damage this weapon gets just so happens to be against the undead, which means that later on when you're fighting various skeletons or when you're fighting Leandra the Shadow Priestess, this weapon might be extremely useful. Damage on the first 2 basic attacks is 50% for both and then 55% for the last one. First secondary skill is called Tendon Swing. Swing your Reaper, dealing 125% physical damage to nearby enemies, knocking them back and inflicting a 2-second snare, followed by Howling Reaper, which is probably my top favorite PvE skill for any of the weapons. Throw a circle that spins in place, dealing 20% physical damage every 0.25 seconds for 2.5 seconds, and the initial projectile hit slows enemies for 1.5 seconds. This weapon is probably one of the most powerful I've used in PvE. The AoE of Howling Reaper combos amazingly with any other AoE based V-Blood abilities you put in. My favorite one to use before this last beta with this weapon was Spectral Assassin. But as we'll talk about later, it does something completely different than it did before. Next up, we've got ourselves the slasher weapons. This is more of an assassin or rogue type weapon, so if that's the playstyle you're interested in, this will be the one for you. The primary attack combo will deal 27.5% damage for the first hit, the same amount for the second hit, and 35% for the last. This skill makes you dash back and forth, slashing your enemies, dealing 60% physical damage and inflicting a 2-second slow on each enemy hit. Followed by Camouflage. Enter a state of invisibility that increases your movement speed by 25% for 3 seconds, and your next primary attack deals 80% physical damage and incapacitates the enemy for 3 seconds. But using any skill will break the camouflage. As you can see, this weapon specializes in guerrilla warfare and or ganking, so if you're interested in that type of playstyle, which is extremely possible in this game, these might be perfect for you. Some of the ways you could be very efficient at ganking is utilizing both human and rat form. In human form, you can hide among most human enemies, not the undead because they won't care and they'll still attack you, but the only thing is that your health bar will still show, so people may know it's you if they look close enough. But if you're in rat form, this is the ultimate form of ganking preparation. In this mode, people can't see your name tags and you can hide in little bushes and rocks extremely well. During the beta, I even came across a group of people fighting Jade the Vampire Hunter and hid in a bush until the exact moment they killed the boss. Then I popped out and began extracting her blood alongside them, since extracting boss blood makes you invulnerable and locks you in animation until it's done. And lastly, we have ourselves the Spear, probably one of the least popular weapon choices at the moment. For the basic attacks, we have another 3-hit combo, 40% for each of the first 2 attacks, 50% for the last one. The first secondary skill is known as 1,000 Spears. Perform a multi-stab attack, dealing 30% physical damage 8 times. You can recast this during the effect to perform a thrust attack, dealing 50% physical damage and knocking enemies back. Followed by the next secondary skill called Harpoon. If you played the spear weapon from Albion Online, this works very similar to how the pull ability does. The spear in my experience can be a fun weapon to use in boss fights and many player versus environment situations, but for PvP it can be incredibly difficult to use because aside from the crossbow, most weapons tend to have a frontal arcing slash where the spear just has like 3 thrusts that lock you in place, and both of its skills are just straight frontal attacks, which can make it very difficult to hit moving targets. That being said, if you put in enough practice, I'm sure you could turn this weapon into a very decent asset for the team. And with that, we've officially concluded the weapon portion of this guide, and now it's time to jump into the ability trees. Let's begin with the blood tree. True to its name, this tree is great for blood draining and life stealing abilities, alongside spells that are capable of shielding you and your teammates. Starts off with the skill called Blood Rage. This ability is found from killing Rufus the Foreman located in the bandit logging camp on the eastern side of Farbane Woods. Shield yourself and nearby allies for 125% of your spell power and increases attack speed by 25% for 5 seconds. Blood Right. This ability is one of the 3 that you initially start with when you first join the game. Block melee and projectile attacks for 1.5 seconds. Blocking an attack heals you for 30% of your spell power and triggers a wave of energy that pushes enemies away, dealing 100% magic damage. During this skill, turn immaterial for 1.2 seconds when this effect triggers. Crimson Aegis, obtained from killing Grayson the Armorer in the bandit armory on the western side of Farbane. Apply a shield to target ally or yourself that shields you for 200% of your spell power and knocks nearby enemies back when the shield is applied. Sanguine Coil, obtained from Meredith the Bright Arrow in the iron mines of Dunley Farmlands. This is a hard boss to kill. I'd wait until you're at least around 45 to 50 gear score, or wait for the undead commander in the mines to start roaming. Then join the fight after they've been fighting each other for a little while. And yes, bosses can fight each other and it's amazing. Launch a projectile that deals 75% magic damage and leeches 40% on enemy hit. Heals ally for 100% and yourself for 40% of your spell power on an ally hit. Right now this is a pretty powerful healing / lifesteal ability, along with Crimson Aegis being my top favorite shield to use. And Sanguine Coil just recently got a buff, so it might be really worth checking this one out. And then we've got Shadow Bolt and Veil of Blood. Both of these are the 2 other abilities that you obtain when starting the game. Shadow Bolt throws a projectile that deals 200% magic damage and inflicts a 1-second fading snare. Veil of Blood dashes towards your mouse cursor direction and eludes nearby enemies, meaning passing through them, for 2.2 seconds. Your next primary attack deals 25% bonus damage and heals you for 5% of your maximum health. Lastly, we've got the 2 ultimates of the Blood Tree. Crimson Beam comes from Raziel the Shepherd, located in the Dunley Monastery on the northwestern side of Dunley Farmlands. This boss is best done around gear score level 53 to 60, and you will need a Holy Resistance Brew Potion before jumping in here. Channel a beam of energy that does 150% magic damage to enemies hit, and heals allies for 100% of your spell power per second for up to 4 seconds. And each target you hit heals you for 25% of your spell power. Hard Strike, obtained from Wilfred the Werewolf Chieftain, northeast of Dunley Farmlands and on the very southwestern side of the Cursed Forest in Gloomgrave Village. Dash forward and strike enemies in a line. Deals 150% magic damage and heal yourself for 150% of your spell power over 3.5 seconds. A Nova of Blood also erupts when this effect ends, dealing 150% magic damage to the victims and nearby enemies. Next we have the Unholy Tree. Starting off with Corpse Explosion, comes from Gorswine the Ravager, who should be located on the bottom left side of Farbane Woods in the Desecrated Graveyard, but please be advised that this boss can roam, so you'll want to make sure you track him just in case. Raise a bone pile from below that explodes at the target location, dealing 125% magic damage and applies a fading snare that lasts for 1 second. Pestilence comes from Nicholas the Fallen in the Forgotten Cemetery on the northern side of Farbane Woods. Launch a wave of 3 unholy projectiles that each deal 40% magic damage, knocks the target back, and inflicts Amplify that increases the damage taken by 25% for 5 seconds. Purgatory, one of the best skills we have for PvP next to a few other candidates, comes from Christina the Sun Priestess, who should be located inside Mosswick Village on the western side of Dunley Farmlands, but she's also known to roam on the road going east as far as Dawnbreak Village. Call down a pillar of energy that slows enemies in an area for 1 second and heals allies for 40% of your spell power. After 1.2 seconds, the pillar erupts in a powerful burst of energy, dealing 75% magic damage to enemies and healing allies for 75% of your spell power. Unstable Mosquito comes from Mata the Curse Weaver on the northwestern side of the Cursed Forest. Summon a mosquito that chases an enemy and explodes after 1 second. Deal 60% magic damage in an area and inflict Amplify that increases damage taken by 25% for 5 seconds. Then we have Ward of the Damned. Also comes from Nicholas the Fallen in the Forgotten Cemetery. Increase your movement speed by 10% and block melee and projectile attacks in front of you for 2 seconds. Each absorbed attack will summon a skeleton, and enemies using melee attacks are knocked back. For the travel skill, we have Veil of Bones also coming from Goreswine the Ravager. Dash towards your mouse cursor direction and eludes enemies for 2.2 seconds. Your next attack launches a projectile dealing 25% magic damage and bounces up to 4 targets while inflicting Amplify that increases damage taken by 25% for 5 seconds. And now for the ultimates. First, we have Fallen Angel, obtained from the current final boss in the game, Solaris the Immaculate himself. Located on the eastern side of Silverlight Hills in the Fortress of Light. Would recommend around 75 to 81 gear score before attempting this guy, but also, the max tier Holy Resistance potion makes this fight way more manageable. Plus you need them to not take damage over time in there, so there's that too. And then, Volatile Arachnid. Coming from Ungora the Spider Queen herself, located on the northeast side of the Cursed Forest. Summon spiderlings that chase down your enemy and explode when dealing 100% magic damage. Also spawns a toxic fume that deals 20% magic damage every 0.8 seconds while slowing enemies by 25%. Can be cast up to 3 times, meaning you can spawn 4 spiders total. Then we've got ourselves the illusion tree filled with spectral base and trick abilities that you can use to confuse your enemies. Starts with Mistrance, coming from Falrot the Soul Taker on the eastern side of the Cursed Forest and the Ancient Village. Block melee and projectile attacks for up to 1.5 seconds, turning immaterial and teleporting to the cursor location when an attack is blocked. And on top of this, reset the cooldown on your first secondary weapon skill. Spectral Assassin, coming from Leandra the Shadow Priestess on the northeast side of Dunleaf Farmlands in the Church of the Damned. But Spectral Assassin summons a spirit at the target location that performs a heavy attack dealing 125% magic damage to nearby enemies, knocking them back and weakening them, reducing damage output by 30% for 5 seconds. This is the skill I was talking about that's had some changes to it made since the previous beta. It used to spawn the Spectral, but then it would start a whirlwind spin towards enemies and it was the perfect skill to combo with the Reaper weapon's E. Next we have Spectral Wolf, coming from Pelora the Feywalker on the northwestern side of Farbane in the Gleaming Meadows. This skill sends out a Spectral Wolf that deals 100% magic damage, inflicts a fading snare and weakens the target, reducing damage output by 30% for 5 seconds. It also bounces to a nearby enemy after each hit, up to 2 hits, and each hit deals 75% less damage. Next we've got Wisp Dance, damn it. Obtain this one from Gore Crusher the Behemoth. It's going to be in the Monster Cave on the eastern side of the Cursed Forest, one of the 3 final bosses, so I highly recommend you level up to late 70s before trying. Summon 3 wisps that circle around you, dealing 25% magic damage to enemies. Recast them to launch all 3 of them as projectiles, dealing 50% magic damage and weakening the target. For the travel skill, we've got Veil of Illusion, another skill coming from Pelora the Feywalker. Dash towards the mouse cursor and elude nearby enemies for 2.2 seconds. Your primary attack deals 25% bonus damage. This also spawns an illusion that throws projectiles that deal 40% magic damage per hit. You can also recast this to return to your starting position, and you spawn a new illusion at your current location. Now for the ultimates. First we have Mirror Strike. Coming from Octavian the Militia Captain in the Bastion of Dunley, located on the northeast side of Dunley Farmlands, just below Leandra the Shadow Priestess. Mirror Strike lets you dash forward and bounce between nearby enemies, striking them for a total of 600% magic damage split across targets within the area over 3 seconds, weakening targets hit by 30% for 5 seconds. This can be recast to be ended early, and then we have the Spectral Guardian, coming from Terra the Stoneheart in Bedrock Pass on the northwestern side of Dunley. Summons a Spectral Guardian that shields all allies including yourself in an area for 125% of your spell power, and it also attacks enemies with the Mighty Swing. This shield is reapplied every second for 7 seconds total. Really enjoyable ability for group PvP in a dangerous situation, or for initiation. Second to last, we have the Chaos Tree. Starts off with Aftershock coming from Errol the Stonebreaker located in the Bandit Copper Mine on the southwestern side of Farbane Woods. Smash the ground, causing a shockwave that erupts, dealing 100% magic damage in a line and inflicting Chaos Burn. Chaos Barrier, found from fighting Quincy the Bandit Chieftain located in the Bandit Stronghold at the very top of Farbane Woods. Keep in mind that you will need a minor explosive at least to get in here, but killing this boss will allow you to get access to iron for the first time, and the Smithy, which is going to let you reach the next stages of progression in this game. Chaos Volley's up next, coming from Lydia the Chaos Archer, who I'm actually not sure where her home base is, but she roams on this road around the Bear territory all the way up to the Bandit Trapper camp. Launch 2 Chaos Bolts in a sequence that deal 125% magic damage and inflict Chaos Burn, a damage over time effect. Then we have Power Surge, coming from Azariel the Sunbringer, located in the city of Brighthaven, specifically on the western side in the Brighthaven Cathedral. The shield itself removes all negative effects and applies a shield on target ally or yourself that shields you for 150% of your spell power. This skill also increases your movement speed by 25% and attack speed by 25% while the shield is up. Void, coming from Morian the Stormwing Matriarch, located on the southwestern side of Silverlight Hills in the Harpy Nest right here. For the travel skill, it's the Veil of Chaos coming from Clive the Firestarter on the western side of Farbane in the Bandit Sulphur Quarry. Veil of Chaos is arguably the best, if not one of the best travel skills. Dash towards your mouse cursor and elude enemies for 2.2 seconds. Your next melee attack deals 25% bonus damage, and this skill can be recasted to dash once more, spawning a second illusion. After a few seconds, your illusions begin to explode, which deals 50% magic damage to nearby enemies. As you can see, with this skill you can dash twice, which comes in handy in just about any situation. Catching people, boss fights, regular travel, you name it. Now let's dive into the ultimates. First up, Chaos Barrage coming from Jade the Vampire Hunter. You'll probably come across her all over Dunley Farmlands at some point, but I've had a lot of luck roaming up and down this road that encompasses the Iron Mine. She's a roaming boss, so you'll want to be sure to track her either way. Chaos Barrage launches 4 orbs that deal 75% magic damage on direct hit, and 75% magic damage to enemies in an area that inflict burn. Merciless Charge, coming from Quincy the Bandit King in the Bandit Stronghold on the north side of Farbane. Charge forward and grab an enemy, dealing 125% magic damage and push them in front of you. Deals 100% magic damage in an area and inflicts a stun lasting 1.5 seconds when reaching maximum range or when colliding with another enemy or object. Lastly, we have ourselves the Frost Tree. So Frost is probably going to have some of the most popular skills for PvP. These skills are capable of freezing your enemy by first chilling them with an initial frost attack and then following up with the second one to execute the freeze. The first ability is called Crystal Lance, coming from Marwyn the Elementalist, located in the Emberleaf Grove on the southeast side of Silverlight Hills. This skill launches a projectile dealing 150% magic damage and inflicting chill. Hitting a chilled enemy will freeze it for 4 seconds, and the Crystal Lance splinters into a nova of projectiles on impact. This is one of the more powerful spells in PvP. Next, we have Frost Barrier, coming from Vincent the Frostbringer, who normally sits around the militia encampment on the central part of Dunley Farmlands and just above the Iron Mine. This ability increases movement speed by 10% and blocks melee and projectile attacks in front of you for 2 seconds. If you block successfully, spawn up to 8 waves of frost, dealing 50% magic damage and inflicting chill when the barrier is struck. Next, we have Frostbat, coming from Keely the Frost Arrow in the Bandit Trapper camp on the eastern side of Farbane. Launch a projectile that explodes on impact, dealing 100% magic damage and inflicting chill on surrounding enemies. If you hit an already chilled enemy with this, it freezes them for 4 seconds, and enemy vampires are only frozen for 2.5 seconds. For the last Frost regular ability, we have Ice Nova coming from Frostmaw the Mountain Terror, a level 56 boss that normally roams around in the Hollowed Mountains. This skill summons a Nova of Ice at the target location, dealing 100% magic damage and freezing any enemies already affected by chill for 4 seconds. The Nova radiates outward and also inflicts chill for 5 seconds to any enemies that take a hit. For the travel skill, we've got Veil of Frost. Coming from Vincent the Frostbringer as well, dash towards your mouse cursor, eluding nearby enemies for 2.2 seconds and shield yourself for 125% of your spell power. Your next primary attack deals 25% bonus damage and conjures a Nova of Frost, dealing 50% magic damage alongside inflicting chill on any nearby enemies. And for the ultimates, first we have Arctic Leap, debatably the very best PvP ultimate you'll see in the game. Comes from the boss known as Terrorclaw the Ogre that's located on the southeast side of the Hallowed Mountains inside the Frozen Cave. The skill makes you leap into the air and strike down at a target location, dealing 225% magic damage. A Nova of Frost erupts from the impact location, freezing any enemy hit for up to 6 seconds, while enemy vampires are only frozen for 3. And for the last ultimate, Frost Vortex, comes from the Winged Horror, located on the far east side of Farbane at the very top of the Dreaded Peak, which you'll need Bat Form from Styx the Sunderer to get to. Conjure a Frost Storm that deals 100% magic damage and pulls enemies towards the center. The storm rages on for 6 seconds, dealing 480% magic damage and inflicting chill on all enemies. And that is officially all the weapons and ability trees we'll have access to for the moment. We still have vampire forms and abilities not tied to combat that we can break down, but I'll save that for another video showcase so I can show off the Stygian animal forms as well. But if you're interested in knowing where to obtain these now, I'll leave a list of the vampire forms and where to find them in the pinned comment below. Have a wonderful night or day, folks. Thanks so much for watching, and farewell.